Hello everyone, and welcome to the question and answer video. I thought I'd kick off by saying first and foremost what a great pleasure it is to get comments from people who watch the channel. Sometimes the perception is that YouTubers know everything, and of course we don't. Nobody can possibly know everything about photography in particular. So it's always nice to pick up hints and tips from people. I've had various suggestions along the way, positive ones, and I'll share some of them as we go through the questions. I have to confess, pretty much old school. I've printed out the questions and topics that I want to make sure that I answer, and I suppose I'm going to kick off with definitely a photographic one from TC. Hello there, TC. Hope things are good over in the States. And TC asked me what my main camera is, because I seem to have quite a collection. Well, to a certain extent that's true, TC. I do have a few cameras on the shelf, so to speak. My main camera is the Olympus OMD EM1 Mark 1, which I'm more than happy with. I would like to get the Mark 2 version. Whether I will invest in another body or not, I don't know. So that's my main camera. Question number 2, with regard to photography in particular, David asked me what my editing software is that I use. And for those of you that don't already know, I use 2 software programs for my stills, and that is Affinity Photo version 2 and On1 Photo Raw version 2022, both of which I love. Affinity tends to be my go-to program. On1 Photo Raw I tend to use if I need to reduce noise in any images that I take. And if I do need to reduce noise in any of the images I take, that's normally a sign that I've got things wrong, to be honest with you. Definitely more me, user error, rather than the camera. But there we are, David. Affinity Photo and On1 Photo Raw. Another good photographic question came from Creso. I'm not sure if it's Creso or Creso, but hello Creso. And that's with regard to apertures on micro four third camera lenses. Is an f2.8 lens still f2.8 if you put it onto micro four thirds, or does it reduce? And the answer is no, it doesn't reduce. Now, it doesn't reduce because lens apertures are determined as a ratio of the diameter, maximum diameter of the lens compared to its focal length. So a 50mm 2.8 will always be a 50mm 2.8, irrespective of what camera you mount it on. The difference comes when you put it onto a micro four thirds camera. You are effectively making it a 100mm 2.8, but as regards the perceived depth of field, then it will look like a 100mm f4 or thereabouts, f4 5.6. I hope that clears that little conundrum up for you. Now, getting away from photography for a second, Alan Coles. Hello, Alan. For anybody who hasn't seen Alan's channel, I'll leave a link to it down below. Fabulous photography and great videography as well. We need to see more of you, Alan, that's the only thing. But Alan asked me 2 things really, two things in one question. First, was there a location that I've been to that I would like to go back and photograph again? There really are 2, Alan, to be honest with you, and I can't really separate them, and I'll try and explain why. First is Dealey Plaza in Dallas, which I visited about 20 years ago, and the enormity of what happened there, you can still feel it. It has a tremendous atmosphere in the book depository, which is now a museum, of course. But to actually take a photograph of where the president's car was roughly when he was shot was incredibly moving for me. To actually walk on the grassy knoll and all that, just it was very emotional. And although it's not a fantastically picturesque part of the world, nevertheless it has fantastic atmosphere. And the other place, still in America, that I would like to go back to for a completely different reason is Looking Back, which I have mentioned before, and that is for the experience, the raw musical talent and appeal of the place. I think it's one of those small places which has gained popularity and is quite unique. Unless you've been, you probably won't appreciate what the heck I'm talking about, but those are the two places that I have been to that I would like to go back to one day. And then if there's one place that I would like to go to that I have never been to, it's all going on down here this morning. The one place in the world that I haven't been to that I would dearly like to have visited is Yosemite. I would just love to see the same sights that Ansel Adams saw and try and imitate his work in some very bad way. And now we're by one of the propellers from the Lusitania, the passenger liner that was notoriously sunk by Germany during World War I. And it's affectionately known locally in Liverpool as the Lucy. And when news of its sinking came through, it sparked riots in the town. Very many German-owned businesses were ransacked. Back to the topic in hand, Alan, stop waffling. Photographic question. Steve K inquired about using the lowest possible ISO on your camera and why some cameras have it marked as a low ISO setting. Now that's because when you look at the range of ISO that any particular camera will offer you, it may run from, say, 200 to 6,400. It may be slightly different to that. Good morning to you. But it will also have a separate setting marked low. So let's assume your base ISO is 200, and then you've got one below that, which is just marked as being low. That would normally be maybe 100 ISO. But that ISO rating is worked out by software in the camera. It's nothing physically to do with the sensor. So on some cameras it will give you good results. In others it may not be quite as good as you would expect. And my personal opinion is to always use the lowest native ISO setting that your camera can give, because that is the one that is specifically rated to the sensor. I hope that's clear. Taking a little bit of a break, I've come over to the Blue Coat, which is now an art centre, originally set up in the early 18th century as a charitable school. And the school itself has moved on to other premises on the outskirts of the city. But this is the oldest surviving building in Liverpool city centre, very early 18th century. Cheers. Oh, much needed coffee. Okay, getting back to the questions and answers. In the recent lens shootout, the 25mm lens shootout that I put up on the channel, I did mention this thing about YouTube's compression, and it's not a major thing, but it doesn't matter what we do as content creators. Doesn't that sound posh? Goodness me. It doesn't matter what we do, how we shoot our video. As soon as you upload it to YouTube, then YouTube applies compression to it, simply to reduce the file size. So it doesn't really matter what I do at my end, it's always going to be slightly degraded when you see it on screen. That's all that the compression is about. And who asked me about that? I think that was Steve K. Forgive me if I'm wrong, Steve. Derek Coe, hi Derek. He thanked me very much for the videos that I've done on the Wirral and Birkenhead Priory, and then the Town Hall. And it's very nice to hear that, Derek, you actually got married in the registry office opposite the Town Hall. Nice to know. And thanks very much for your continuing support. Enrique, I have to come to Enrique sooner or later, and Enrique's asked me a number of questions. Apologies for the crackling of the paper if you heard that. Enrique was also puzzled at the lack of people in Hamilton Square, Birkenhead. Now, okay, it was early morning when I was there, around about 10:30, 11 o'clock, I think, on a Sunday. But it has never really attracted huge numbers of visitors, Enrique. It's very much an overlooked jewel in Birkenhead's crown, to be perfectly honest with you. The Town Hall's just fantastic. And Enrique, when it came to the photograph that I put up in that same video, displaying a pawnbroker's shop and a fruit seller's shop, I'm not sure whether they were original buildings or not, but the artwork has been created very, very convincingly. That's what made me take the photograph in the first place, let's be honest. Okay, Alan G. Hello, Alan. It's not a question, but it is an observation, and I loved what he said. Alan says, basically, I have recently dug up my Panasonic GF1, and just like vinyl records, it's so old it's become good again. And I think that's just a fantastic way to sum up the sort of older digital cameras that are still very much usable. Another question from TC, and it was regarding the little GF1 that I took out and about in the streets of Liverpool. And TC was curious to know how on earth I managed to work out whether my images were in focus and all the rest of it when shooting from the hip and not referring to the LCD screen on the back of the camera. And quite honestly, TC, if you work in that way, you don't. It's a way of doing street photography that takes a little bit of discipline, not looking at the screen, not bringing the camera up to the eye, and just keeping fingers crossed that you've got things more or less right when you get back and look at the images on your computer monitor. Obviously, in the majority of cases, having an autofocus lens it's really a necessity. I'm not saying you can't get good results shooting like that with manual focus, particularly if they're really short focal length lenses, but autofocus helps a great deal. And you've just got to hope beyond hope that when you get back and look at the images, that you've got something decent. Another coffee, I think. I do appreciate all sorts of comments and questions, and I suppose one of the most telling came from Harry Sullivan. Hello, Harry. This is by no means having a dig at you, but for those of you that saw my review of the Pixco 8mm wide-angle lens that I bought on a whim, Harry was not backward in coming forward and saying, what the heck did I expect? It was a toy lens, couldn't expect anything more from it. And to be fair, Harry, you were quite right. The ethos of the channel is to try and get good quality results out of budget equipment. That usually means maybe exploring the second-hand market, pre-owned if you want to be posh, and certainly keeping your eyes open for some well-priced, cheaper lenses. Now the Pixco, yeah, it was a disaster. End of story. Now we come on to a question from Nick. Hello, Nick. If you haven't watched Nick's channel during the meanwhilest, I'll leave a link to that down below as well. But Nick asked me a very interesting question. Assuming that an alien crash landed in my back garden, so to speak, and I had to show him one photograph of what photography was all about, and I guess by association what human beings are all about, what image would I choose to show him? Now, Nick, I've cheated. I'm choosing two. One that I would definitely not show him, and that's this one by Joel Goodman from, I think it was 2016, New Year's Eve in Manchester. And certainly in the UK, it set the internet on fire. Everybody comparing it to the greatest works of art ever, including the likes of Leonardo da Vinci, Michelangelo. What a load of rubbish, in my honest, humble opinion. The one photograph that I would choose to show an alien that illustrates what photography is all about is this one, taken by a certain Mr. Michael Collins from the Apollo 11 spacecraft, as Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin made their way down to be the first human beings to land and set foot on the moon. And the interesting thing about this photograph, of course, is that it shows everybody on Earth except one. Welcome to Sefton Park and the bandstand. I've recently done a video showing you the Palm House, which is basically just through the trees up there. So hopefully some of you at least will get to watch that. Very picturesque spot. It's an incredibly cold day today. Hat, thick coat, fingerless mitts, all the rest of it. And for that reason it's incredibly quiet. Certainly on a weekend this whole stretch would be filled with people promenading and walking their dogs, letting their kids go up and down on bikes. Anyway, enough waffling. Again, Alan, get back to the topic in question. Enrique, you asked me about the 400mm Sigma. What's it like to use handheld? And the answer to that quite simply is impossible. You've only got to breathe in or blink and the camera moves. It's a necessity to mount it on a tripod. End of story. Now, I mustn't forget to tell you about the badge. The badge that's on the strap for my shoulder bag. The badge itself was awarded by the RAC, the Royal Automobile Club, for volunteers who marshalled during the RAC rally back in the 60s and 70s. Ever since I was 14 years old, I got involved in the motorsport of rallying. I was a navigator stroke co-driver. Co-driver sounds too fancy, but navigator for sure. And I had about 10 years enjoying myself, doing all sorts of events, and marshalling on the RAC rally was certainly one of those jobs that we all looked forward to. It was one of those occasions when you got to see the very best drivers in the world competing on some of the very best forestry stages in the United Kingdom. So that's what it was for. I'll include a few photographs of the kind of cars that I used to be in and compete in. There's one shot actually of the 2019 Wales Rally GB, which is what the RAC Rally turned into, which started from the Liver buildings on the waterfront in Liverpool I don't want to bore you too much. That's the history behind the badge. Let's move on. And now, before the battery on the GoPro cries enough, I just want to say a huge thank you to everybody who has subscribed and watched my videos. Special thanks to everybody who has left a comment of any type. I've had some wonderful comments and some very helpful tips sent to me. I hope I can continue the channel in the same vein for the foreseeable future. Who knows? We will see. But for now, from a very, very, very cold Liverpool, I'm going to say enjoy your photography, and I'll see you all very soon. Bye for now.